In May of 2026, the AI startup Anthropic closed its eighth funding round since emerging in 2021. With backing from firms like Sequoia Capital, the company reached a valuation of $1 trillion, just days before filing for a public listing. On paper, this five-year-old software company is now worth more than J.P. Morgan Chase, a global banking institution that took 2 centuries to build. Then, 3 days after setting the stage for one of the largest market listings in history, Anthropic released a report titled, "When AI Builds Itself." It urged world governments to consider slowing down the entire industry. Co-founder Jack Clark warned that AI is nearing a point of no return, where the machines can improve their own code with almost no human help. He argued the world needs to hit the brakes before it's too late. Anthropic proposed a specific condition for this slowdown. They would only stop development if every other major lab in every country agreed to a simultaneous pause under verifiable rules. This creates a distinct point of friction. By calling for a universal pause at the exact moment they've reached a $1 trillion valuation, Anthropic is asking for a rule that would freeze the industry leaderboard exactly as it stands today. By May 2026, over 80% of Anthropic's code was written by their AI, Claude. With AI handling the writing, engineers transitioned into reviewers, shipping 8 times more code per day than in 2024. A week's work is completed in 24 hours. If a global pause is implemented now, any competitor that hasn't already automated 80% of its own development will find it mathematically impossible to close the gap. Anthropic's internal responsible scaling policy suggests that when a model becomes capable of doing its own research, it reaches a capability threshold. At that point, the company mandates intensive testing and stronger safeguards rather than pulling the plug. Because Anthropic is the first to reach these thresholds, their internal safety checks are becoming the baseline for the entire industry. They are effectively defining the rules of the race, while they are the only ones currently able to clear the hurdles. These internal policies nearly became state law. California's Senate Bill 1047 mandated external testing for any model costing over $100 million. However, Governor Gavin Newsom eventually vetoed the proposed legislation in September 2024. Critics noted that the proposed fines for safety violations, ranging up to 30% of a training run, would affect a $1 trillion company and a small startup very differently. For a giant, it's a manageable expense. For a newcomer, it equates to the entire company. This has sparked a backlash from the open source community, led largely by Meta. By releasing models like Llama for free, they attempt to keep the technology accessible to developers who can't afford the overhead of these proposed regulations. Meta's chief AI scientist, Yann LeCun, argued that overplaying doomsday risks is a strategic move to push regulators toward laws locking out smaller players. He warns that fear-based claims could end up making open-source development legally impossible. If these safety thresholds become global law, they would create a wall between two groups, the few firms wealthy enough to meet the compliance costs and everyone else who is left on the outside. The reality is that a truly global pause would require the US and China to enforce the same rules simultaneously, a level of cooperation that Anthropic itself acknowledges is unlikely to ever happen. In the meantime, the acceleration continues. Anthropic's revenue hit $47 billion in May 2026, a 5-fold increase from the previous year. While they call for restraint, their own growth is reaching a record pace. But the effects of this technology aren't waiting for a global agreement. The displacement of the human workforce is already visible in the data. Data from the Stanford Digital Economy Lab shows that coding jobs for workers aged 22 to 25 fell 20% between 2022 and 2025. During that same stretch, tech layoffs surpassed 140,000 in the first few months of 2026 alone. Major firms like Salesforce and Google have been freezing junior hiring for over a year. The entry-level positions that used to be the doorway into the industry are being systematically replaced by the same AI tools Anthropic is using to write its own code. The current push for AI safety looks less like a move to protect humanity and more like an effort to protect a market position. By setting the rules for a world they have already built, these companies are ensuring that once they reach the top, they can pull up the ladder behind them.